I am really getting sick and tired of seeing this kind of stuff, and it makes it even worse that Gypsy Rose Blanchard is resharing it.
This woman was just arrested for trying to be like DeeDee Blanchard. Sadly, what DeeDee did to Gypsy Rose is not unique.
It's actually very unique, okay? Real cases of Munchausen by proxy are rare.
31-year-old Kaitlyn Laura out of Texas. She has a young son who has not been named publicly since he is a minor, and his mom has described him as being severely ill, wheelchair-bound, and in constant need of medical equipment and attention. Sound familiar? She even insisted that her 3-year-old son needed a feeding tube despite the fact that when he was not in the presence of his mother, he could eat and drink normally. She also provided plenty of false medical information to have her son undergo surgeries that he did not need. And outside of this seeming like a very typical Munchausen by proxy case, there was also a financial incentive. Authorities are also investigating 3 GoFundMe accounts that reportedly were collecting funds for her son's medical issues. The medical issues that simply did not exist. So on top of the medical child abuse charges she's facing, fraud charges are also expected. Thankfully, the 3-year-old boy was removed from her care by CPS in February of 2026. My questions are, how long has this been going on for? Could it have been caught earlier? And what is the route going forward to help that boy with any psychological and health issues from his mother's abuse?
I'm just so sick and tired, you guys, because every time there is a suspected case of FDIA, they compare it to the DeeDee Blanchard case. Problem is, Gypsy Rose Blanchard lied about it all. And yes, there are some similarities, okay? Baby J in the Kaitlyn Laura case had a feeding tube. Gypsy Rose Blanchard had a feeding tube, but it is not the same. There's a lot of differences. Let's talk about those. Firstly, when Gypsy Rose was born, she was born with microcephaly. Okay. She was born with a lot of issues. She had breathing issues. She really needed these medical procedures that she had done. And there really was not that many. And it's not like DeeDee just went to the doctor and said, hey, give my kid a feeding tube. She was worked up in a feeding hospital for a month before they finally decided to give that to her because she was not gaining weight. That feeding tube saved her life. No, she was not born perfectly healthy. She has a chromosomal disorder, and underlying issues from that can be muscular dystrophy. They thought she had muscular dystrophy because they hadn't even discovered the disorder yet. With the microdeletion, the 1q21.1, it causes things to go out of whack. It caused Gypsy to have a high palate. That affected her teeth. That affected her eating. And she still has a high palate. That has not been fixed. So when these creators come on here and they compare these other cases that probably are fictitious disorder imposed on another to DeeDee Blanchard's case, all you're making us think, well, is that case even real too? That's what you're doing. So instead of comparing these cases to DeeDee Blanchard, why don't you go research the Kaitlyn Laura case? Based on the questions that she asked at the end of her video, I don't think she looked into this case at all. Now, something that Becca Scoops mentioned when she was on the panel with us last night is that the sheriff of Tarrant County, that's where the Kaitlyn Laura case comes out of, Sheriff Wayborn, has ties to Mike Weber. So Mike Weber, and she's right, I went and looked into it. Mike Weber is a retired detective from Tarrant County. Okay, do you guys know who Mike Weber is? Mike Weber co-authored this book with Andrea Dunlop. Andrea Dunlop is a self-proclaimed Munchausen or FDIA expert because she accused her sister of suffering from that. After her sister's children were taken from her, she went to court and she was proven to be innocent. So what kind of expert is that, Andrea? Bill Wayborn has been very active when it comes to getting laws passed for medical abuse and even has an adoptive daughter that he claims suffered from medical abuse. And I'm not saying the Kaitlyn Laura case isn't really FDIA because I haven't seen the 18-page report. I've read as much as I can, but I need that report.
Out of Glenrose tonight. This is where a mother's facing charges, accused in what investigators are calling a pretty disturbing case of child medical abuse involving Munchausen syndrome by proxy. Fair warning, some of the details in this are not easy to hear, but it's the big part of the story. And our Amelia McGavro has all the details.
The person that's being accused is Kaitlyn Laura, or at least that's what the media outlets are calling her. On Book of Faces, she goes by Kaitlyn Rose Herring, and I think the name is the same over there on TikTok. Now, she is from Glenrose, Texas. But this had to be escalated or turned over to Tarrant County because Glen Rose did not have the resources for a case of medical child abuse like Tarrant County. Tarrant County is kind of like the experts when it comes to FDIA in Texas and probably even in the United States.
In an 18-page arrest affidavit, Tarrant County investigators say 31-year-old Kaitlyn Laura subjected her 3-year-old son to severe ongoing medical abuse. Detectives say for months, Laura claimed her son had serious conditions, stomach issues, trouble walking, even cerebral palsy. For years, he was fed through a tube.
Media just said that the child was being fed through a tube for years, but based on my research, the feeding tube was placed in May of 2025. That's not even been a year yet. Maybe he had one before. I could be wrong.
Kept in a wheelchair, but doctors never diagnosed any of it. Investigators say at one point, the child was on 17 different medications, eating less than 1,000 calories a day, and even consuming dog food.
This narcissistic person, for their own pleasure of getting the sympathy for having a fragile child, is what we see playing out in front of us.
For Tarrant County Sheriff Bill Wayborn, this hits close to home. He says his own adopted daughter was also a victim of Munchausen abuse.
Very similar to this case. You know, the starvation, the multiple meds that weren't needed, the surgeries that weren't needed.
Investigators say Laura didn't just mislead doctors, she built an entire story online. They found at least 3 GoFundMe pages asking for money, plus an Amazon wish list, a Facebook page tracking her son's so-called medical journey. And in one fundraiser, she claimed he'll be in a wheelchair for life, something doctors say was simply not true. Authorities say the total amount raised is still unclear, but there's now a separate investigation into possible Medicaid fraud tied to unnecessary treatments.
And to the people out there that gave money to it, I'm very, very sorry, but it wasn't meant for good stuff.
Laura now faces felony charges across Somerville, Dallas, and Tarrant counties, including injury to a child causing serious bodily injury and aggravated assault with a deadly weapon.
You call this a serious crime. How do you feel like these victims truly are damaged long term?
There's scars on his body from those surgeries that weren't necessary, and that he's going to have to be told why are they here. There could be trauma for many, many years to come.
The child was placed in foster care back in February, and CPS says that he's now eating normally and is being weaned off of medications and thankfully doing well. As for mother Kaitlyn Laura, she's out on bond currently. We reached out to her and her husband, and he hung up when contacted.
Kaitlyn's social media is still up. Okay. You can see probably a year's worth, all of 2025. She is posting about the younger child's conditions, asking for help, etc. Okay. I did get some of those posts, but I don't know that I'm going to get all of this in this video. I may have to make a part 2. The other thing is there's more than one child in that home. So did they only take the youngest child? This is being portrayed like there was many unnecessary surgeries. All I could find was the feeding tube. But again, I don't have the full report. So it said May 2025, medical teams placed a feeding tube, but the hospital became suspicious after Laura returned to the hospital with claims that the boy was having problems with the tube. Staff claims to have seen the boy eat multiple meals by mouth and attempted to stand while the mother made him use the wheelchair. They also have like a caught on camera type title on one of the things. The only thing caught on camera was that the kid was eating solid foods. That's all I found. Now, the first report of medical abuse was made to CPS in June of 2025 after doctors determined Laura had exaggerated or lied about her son's condition. Then in October, a report from a teacher who said the boy could eat solid food and moved about campus without his gait trainer or wheelchair. So this is the gait trainer. So it's a wheeled supportive mobility device. This says she married Dustin Herring in June of 2024. So I'm assuming that Dustin's not the biological father because there was claims where the biological father was saying the child ate food fine, didn't need the feeding tube. So I'm assuming those are 2 different people. And if they're not married anymore, you can't tell by her social media. So after the feeding tube was placed, CPS is alleging that she came back saying that the boy was having issues with feeding tube and that the mother requested for the boy to be placed in a posy bed. After that, the child was placed in foster care. This is what a posy bed is. And yes, there was at least 3 GoFundMes that I found on her social media, but they're no longer active. Let's go through some of these social media posts that Kaitlyn was making. Well, what do you know? May of 2025. Y'all, please, please, please pray for our son, Jay. He isn't tolerating the feeds at all and just had his heart rate in 160-ish for 10 minutes before throwing up all his feeds. He is so weak, he can't sit up on his own and isn't taking anything in oral and have been here since Tuesday. Okay, before that, she posts, my family really needs prayers right now. My youngest Jay isn't doing well and has been at Cook's since Tuesday, having issues with fever, tolerating feeds, and now there is talk about having to switch buttons or replace it completely because he isn't able to get feeds through his tube and button. This is what prompted them to put the child into foster care because of the claims of the issues with the feeding tube. This is a post from June 2025 that you can pause to read. More posts from the end of May where she said the button is working fine and that, everything is normal. Waiting on gastro to round on us this morning. Pray we get things fixed today and can start getting this baby back to healthy. Something else that I found to be interesting is that in October of 2025, she was looking for a civil attorney. There's lots of posts of her complaining about the hospitals too. Now, I am not defending this woman. Don't get it twisted. I am sharing the information that I found with you guys. I'm not convinced either way. I'm not convinced if this is FDIA. I'm not convinced that it is because I just don't have enough information. But what's not helping is comparing this to the DeeDee Blanchard case because Gypsy Rose was actually sick as a child. So stop doing that. I've made a lot of videos today, so I'm going to go take a break, pack a bowl of cereal, and put a pin in this Kaitlyn Laura case for now. I will be making a part 2, though. You bet your ass on that. I just really think that people need to go read the DSM-5, learn exactly what Munchausen or FDIA proper terminology is before you're saying this is that, okay? If you need a diagnosed, confirmed case of Munchausen by proxy, here is a list for you. If you want to compare the Kaitlyn case to Olivia Gant, Jennifer Bush, or Hannah Mildebrandt, do that. We have worked far too hard to try to clear DeeDee Blanchard's name, okay? The biggest difference here is that Gypsy Rose got better, not sicker.